So what is your writing process like? Do you wake up in the
I
morning, coffee, sit down? How's it
That
work for
depends. If
you?
I'm really at like on something and I have something and I have a defined deadline and I want a certain amount of work done within a certain time, yeah, I'll do that and I'll get up and I'll hopefully work like 5 hours straight before I even think about anything else. But that varies a lot. I mean, like recently, I'm right now writing a follow-up script to Spookies,
Oh,
which is
really?
going to be, I think, totally like out beyond the parameters of anything anyone is expecting, and hopefully
Wow.
a good movie for this time for
Yeah.
on my level of good. Um, but
Was that
at the moment, what
was that even something that you would have considered years ago?
a sequel? Well,
Yeah.
first of all, we didn't know because the film was still pretty much universally panned everywhere there was any
Yeah.
writing about it. Most people who saw it didn't like it, except I started, slowly over the years, I'd read, as the internet got filled with thousands of fan reviews and things like that, you'd say, all right, well, people actually did like this. They do understand that, yeah, despite everything, we had some pretty good special effects. That there was something there. It wasn't just another slapdash, like, fuck the audience, we just want your money.
Yeah.
Um, so I think, I think, I mean, we were talking about writing process. My writing process changes at times. I mean, right now I'm working on this sequel, right? I wrote a very longer than usual. Like I wrote like a 50-page treatment. Usually I
Oh, yeah.
sometimes write a treatment, sometimes I don't. But this was like really, like boom, boom, boom. Almost every scene that would be in the script is here, and you have an idea of what's happening. But at the same time, I wanted to limit it, and I went for 50 pages because I don't know about you, but it's very difficult to get people to read things, even if they tell you they're dying to read it. You know what I'm saying? It's like, oh,
Yes.
I have to read it. I have to read it. And then like, here it is. And, 7 years later that.
Well, I have like a 51 page script that's not complete, and I gave it to a buddy of mine. He really wanted to read it, and he's had it for 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks.
Yeah.
It still hasn't finished it. So yeah, I get it. But so
What I was just to finish that up, what I was going to say is what I'm doing right now. I wrote this treatment, but at the same time, and I wanted to keep it short, but at the same time, lots of ideas were occurring to me. So everything that came into my head, like a lot of dialogue, a lot of ideas about the characters, etc., I just made separate notes. So I'm right now in the process of incorporating all these notes, and I've still got like tons of notes to go through, and I've got like over 100 pages of script. So I mean, I'm coming along pretty nicely, and it's
yeah.
much easier it's always easier to subtract than to add.
So is this sequel? Are you trying to bring the team back together? Whoever's on.
At the moment, I've been doing the script, and the script is based. Tom and I had some discussions about a sequel. He had already, for years, long prior to the Blu-ray release, Tom and I spent years trying to see if we could get rights to Spookies and do a Blu-ray set, much like the one that was put out ourselves, because we didn't think anybody else was going to, because the film had gotten so little attention over the years.
Yeah.
And we did a lot of detective work, and we talked to people in film archives and in film libraries. We talked to people in the film labs in New York City. And we were trying to, first of all, we were trying to find out if any of the original footage existed. And we covered like as many, places and as many people as we thought might be able to help us in some way. And we discovered pretty much nothing. And all things seem to be pointing back to the fact that Michael Lee, despite the fact that he had sold rights to the film off to Vestron at one point, actually, Vestron didn't release it in the US, but they did get rights and they released it overseas.
Huh.
And in the Library of Congress, and probably in the listing that's still online for the Library of Congress, Spookies is owned by Vestron, but it's not, because the rights reverted to Michael Lee.
Yeah.
And it was just recently he was approached by Vinegar Syndrome, and Vinegar Syndrome didn't just buy distribution rights; they bought all rights. They are now world rights holders to Spookies.
Oh, wow.
Which is good because it makes it at least simpler for me,
Yeah.
certainly in anything that happens in the future. But at the time, we backed off because, I mean, Tom and I knew if we went to Michael Lee, he would like laugh and tell us to fuck ourselves.
So you're writing it. Any talks with the original?
Well, all right, I'm sorry. I keep sidetracking here.
It's okay.
But Tom and I talked about it, and we had a few ideas. And now the original title of Spookies, what became Spookies, was Twisted Souls, right? So we had actually written another treatment for a story for something really low budget, like $100,000 movie called Twisted Souls, right? Which was about these people living in like an old hotel, and there's some kind of like creature in the basement that's, draining energy from them and all this shit. And so Tom said, "Hey, I've had an idea. Like, why don't we? There's an idea. I think we could do that as a Spookies follow-up based on our old idea from the original Twisted Souls that that we use the title from." And we talked about it. And we had some conversations here and there. Now, Tom before this had at least a dozen times had conversations with me and says that there's no audience for a sequel to Spookies. There's barely an audience for Spookies. He says, I am not writing a sequel to Spookies. I don't want to be associated with it. I don't want to have this to be my legacy. I refuse to have anything to do with it, right? So then we talked about it a little. And at the time, I was like, I was working a job that was taking up all my time. I was working in Pakistani television, of all things, in a studio here on the East Coast. And Tom wrote like a few pages of like an outline, right? And I was like floored because it's like, like overnight he suddenly came up with this. I was like, oh, okay, great. Thank you for doing this. I just didn't have the time to even think about it. And it was good. And I thought there was potential there. And it's much more ambitious. It's not even so much a sequel. There are direct references, but I wrote it in such a way that if, like Vinegar Syndrome said, oh, we want like an outrageous amount of money for the rights to call this a sequel, I could just modify it slightly and it wouldn't really matter. But it's much more expansive. It's much more of a movie, in my opinion. It's ambitious. It is. I'm really, for my sake and for Tom, and this is what we wanted to do, what we talked about at the time before he passed away. We wanted to do something that we could be proud of. We could say, all right, whatever you think of what we did, here's what we can do.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm aiming for right now. And so far, the reaction to the treatment has been excellent. I mean, I've gotten like solid responses. I'm just about on the verge of starting to go a little public with what's going on with it. I don't. My ex-partner Brendan Faulkner. I don't know if he's going to be involved or not. He may be involved. But my partner Tom's widow, who was also one of our art directors, she designed a lot of things in the film. She made the Ouija board in Spookies.
Oh, okay.
She's been like involved in like sort of going through this whole process with me because she has access to all of Tom's old records and notes. And so we've tried as much as possible. I mean, we've just taken dialogue and stuff he's written from other stuff he wrote in the past and it's now in this new project as a way to get more of him into it. Plus it's new material. Yeah. So I'm feeling good about that. But this new thing also is Spookies is often referenced as a horror comedy, and I think a lot of the comedy aspect was not there when we were working on it. And I also think that what happened is after they redid the film and turned it into Spookies, probably the first few audiences they showed it to laughed at it a lot, and so they decided, oh, it's a horror comedy. But that was not the intention.
Yeah.
Okay. This is an intentional horror comedy, and I want it to be both as horrific in some ways as possible and as insane and fun and funny as possible. I want this to, if nothing else, I want people to say, damn, I had such a great time. I really didn't expect to have this good a time.
Yeah. Well, do you feel any pressure because the original is so beloved by?
No, I feel no pressure because I could have a wet dream and it would be better than Spookies. I mean, I don't mean to say that, and this is no offense to all those wonderful people who love the film, etc. But try and understand, the love for what's there aside, that even when the film was entirely ours, it was a film that was compromised every step of the way. That like we had to get approval on like literally every word of dialogue, every idea, every turn of the plot, everything.
Yeah.
From someone who really was not equipped to be able to pass judgment on these things. I think then, and I think more so now, that we were capable of a lot more and a lot better.
Well, hopefully we'll get to revisit the world of Spookies. Is there any sort of timeline?
I'm hoping to finish up a script within a couple of months. I have been, speaking to people. I am looking at a certain budget, which is bigger than the original Spookies budget. It's sort of, I mean, I was thinking of it in terms of the, what would the Spookies budget be adjusted for inflation? But a lot of things have also changed, and a lot of things, I want to stick with practical effects, for instance, right? But practical effects have come a long way since then. There are a lot more methods to do things and get certain kinds of results. Bear in mind, on Spookies, generally, as we were, shooting the film, we, all right, here's the first scene of this monster, and we would just like try and make it work, because we had just gotten the monster put together. We had done no tests. We had like no way of knowing what was going to work. And with practical effects on set, that's where your budget goes. It goes to people standing around endlessly, an entire crew waiting for like blood to drip the right way or something.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, now I'm pretty sure there's like a whole army of special effects guys out there that that grew up from this movie that want to really go back and work on it with you, like.
Yeah, no, I've had like a number of people inquire. I don't think we'll have a problem putting together a terrific, not just a good effects team, but people who are all, enthused because they're fans of something that they're now getting to be a part of.
Yeah.